I'm Judy Gelman Myers with Shalom TV JBS, and I'm speaking with Vanessa Lapa, director of the fascinating documentary The Decent One, based entirely on a collection of letters, diaries, and photographs written by Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the final solution, and his family.
Donnerstag, 28. Juli 1914. Schild und Schwert gespielt. Das Spiel ist sehr interessant und noch lange nicht zu Ende.
So bin ich bei vielen nicht beliebt. Warum?
Gutes Liebchen, mein Lieber. Ich könnte mir für mich solch einen Mann nicht vorstellen.
Du liebe, süße kleine Frau. Unser Paradies, das wir uns gebaut haben, kann uns kein Mensch zerstören. Mir tut es so leid, dass ich unseren Hochzeitstag zum ersten Mal übersehen habe. Ich habe heute unmenschlich viel zu tun gehabt.
Unsere Rache wird wunderbar.
Wie herrlich wird unser Leben sein.
Alle bekommen die Orden und Auszeichnungen, nur Papi nicht. Wenn er nicht wäre, dann wäre manches anders.
What was your husband's name?
Heinrich Himmler.
Who do you think was responsible for the concentration camps?
Ich denke, für die Lager war es mein Mann.
Mein lieber Geliebter, bist du brav und anständig?
The film won Best Documentary at the 2014 Jerusalem Film Festival. Vanessa, before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about your background, coming from Belgium, moving to Israel?
I was born and raised in Belgium. In 1994, at the age of 19, I decided to go and live in Israel to make Aliyah. And I studied I was at the Hebrew University for a year learning Hebrew, perfectionizing my Hebrew in order to be able to study in Hebrew. And then I moved to Tel Aviv. I studied political science at the University of Tel Aviv. And then I started to work as a researcher on Channel 1 in a weekly political program, and then a daily political program, and then the news. And then I became a news reporter on Channel 10. And in 2006, I opened my own independent production company in Tel Aviv.
Mazel tov. And how did this collection come to be in your hands?
Well, the collection was for 40 years kept under the bed of an Israeli man named Chaim Rosenthal. In 2006, he decided that it's time to get rid of it, and he wanted to make sure he will give it out to someone who will make something important with it. His son called a professor at the Tel Aviv University who knew me from the news. So the professor called me, and he asked me if I would be interested to come and see a collection of Heinrich Himmler with him that may interest me as a journalist or as a filmmaker. So I went to see the collection, and after a few weeks of reflections, I decided to pick up the challenge.
And you actually brought some pieces from the collection. Can you talk about those?
I did. It's a very extensive collection. There are about 135 still pictures, 350 letters from Heinrich to Marga, about 20 different kinds of diaries and postcards. This is, for example, a postcard that Heinrich Himmler sent to his daughter in 1944. What is quite remarkable in the negative way, what is outrageous in this postcard is that this is what Himmler chose to send his 12-year-old daughter, the drawing. So it's soldiers with helmets. And this actually answers the question when people ask me, on the one hand, he was a loving father and a loving husband, and on the other side, he was a murderer. In my eyes, we don't have a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde here. A loving father would not send a picture with soldiers and helmets and guns to his daughter. A loving father, in my eyes, it's subjective, would send some, pink hearts and drawings of cartoons or flowers. So the perversity of Heinrich Himmler came out also in his seemingly loving and caring family life. He's telling his wife before they get married that he loves her more than anything, and so it's a very long letter, and at the end of the letter he says, but there is something I may love more than you, which is the nation and the fatherland. So even in his really loving letters, you will also have the twist, the hit. You will never have it clean loving.
And the other?
The others is, this is the diary of Gudrun, the diary that she wrote from...
That's his daughter.
His daughter, yes, from the age of 12 until the age of 16. The last page of the diary ends in 45, and she's just stopping to write. Today in the evening, a lot is happening in the world, exceptionally by us. Today in the evening, 24th, she was most probably shaking. They had to leave the house. So you see the page is suddenly empty. What is very shocking is, for example, that the pictures that she's pasting in her personal diary of a child, of a 13 and 14-year-old child, are pictures of her father, of Adolf Hitler, of her father, not as in civil clothes, of her father with his military clothes. This is a flower she got from her father in 1943, so she pasted the flower. And another impressive, these are the color drawings that she did when she came back from her trip to the SS concentration camp in Dachau on a Sunday afternoon. And the last item is the expenses of the family from 41 until 45. And you can see it only emphasizes the gap between what was happening on the one hand and what was happening on the other side. They were spending money on massages and on hairdressers and on small money and on flowers for Gudrun. And when you double check when you put the dates one against the other, you see that a day where more than 200,000 people were murdered, the Himmler family was spending 5.32 marks on a massage.
Yeah. Unbelievable. When you first read the collection, what jumped out at you? And did your impression change the more time you spent with the collection?
I didn't read the collection at once because everything is written in Old German, so it was first transcribed into modern German and then translated into English and Hebrew. So I got it part by part during a few months. Everything blew me, out of my mind because after a few weeks, I knew what to expect. I knew that I will find time and time again the perversion, the hate, the evil, and it didn't change the fact that every time that I read it, I was shocked and I didn't know how to. I was surprised over and over again, although I knew that this will be coming. I was waiting for the sentence, but it's something that, even if you spend 7 years on it, you are still shocked every time you read it, even that you know what you're going to read. And so the fact that he was a human being and not a monster is something that stays with me, and I hope that this is the message of the film, because it would be way easier if what we would have discovered from this with the historians and with the psychiatrists that were with us analyzing the content was that he was a mentally sick man, or that he was a monster, that he was not human. It would be easier, because then we know that there are a few mentally sick people, and by mistake he got to a job, and okay, it was a mistake. Unfortunately, he was very mentally healthy, and he made a choice. And the choice he did was to choose evil. And there is nothing banal in the evil that Himmler chose. And I think we should be very aware of the fact that people like Himmler are everywhere, because they are like us, or like me. I don't want to offend. So they are normal people. They are everywhere, and in a certain economical, geopolitical situation with a leader like Hitler and a whole people behind, then it can bring to a collapse of a whole culture and to the murder of millions and millions of human beings.
Right. You actually worked with a psychiatrist, Professor Nathaniel Laor,
yes,
who was at Yale and Tel Aviv universities. Yes. What was his take on the material?
You know, to have the accurate analysis, we shall ask him. He wrote a lot about it. One of the main questions that I kept asking him is if he wouldn't, I regretted that he knew, he's the professor who gave me the call to go and see the material, so he knew it was the Himmler collection. I regret that he couldn't read it without knowing who was writing. And I kept on asking him, if you wouldn't know that it's Heinrich Himmler, professionally, your professional assessment, would you say, okay, this boy, this young man will turn out to be what he turned out to be? And he said, no, I could say that this young boy and man would turn out to be very, very dangerous and problematic, but not up to the extent that Himmler actually became from his writings. Professor Laor is definitely from the point of view that there is no Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, that all his relationships are perverted, twisted, that it's a sadomasochistic game, mind game with his soldiers, with his wife, with
his mistress.
With his mistress, definitely. And he's, you know, Himmler is in his personal life, you have no way out, because he will always surpass you, and he will always knock you out. The knockout will always come, even with his mistress, who wanted to earn her own money. For him, it was a deal breaker. He didn't allow her to do this. So he will always castrate and knock out the person that is with him, not only in his public life, but also in his private life.
Interesting. Can you talk about the footage? Is all of it archival?
All of the footage is archival. There is no reenactments. The archives are from 151 different sources.
Wow.
We tried to, the concept of the film was to look and to research material that is not the propaganda material that we know, because we wanted to remain faithful to the text, to show what they saw. So we went to all the places. We started by going to all the places in Germany and in Europe where Himmler was, to ask from families from the same socioeconomical level of the Himmler family for private home videos, to retrace the places he was and to have footage from those places, and to not to use the propaganda footage that is usually used, because it would you know, it was less, in the beginning, it was not in order to be different. It was an artistic choice in order to remain faithful to the script, to the text, to the words of him and his family.
When you went to these families, did they know, I mean, what was their reaction? Did they know how it was going to be used?
Well, I went to a few of them, but we had a whole team, and for 3 years we had a visual research team in Germany and in America. So I didn't do this alone. To most of the family, to most of the German families who are children and grandchildren from high-ranking Nazis, I didn't go. It's professionals and people who know how to talk to those people who went. We got, I can tell you one story, but most of it we got, and we have the rights, and this is why we have a film like this. But for example, the Heinrich family gave us some private home videos for the research, and when we chose the amount of seconds that would be in the film, and we asked to purchase the rights, they decided not to grant us the rights. So they gave it to the German research team, and once it came to production and to finalizing, they decided that because it is an Israeli production, we cannot have the private footage.
Interesting. In the director's notes, you say, at the core of this film, there is an appeal for a cinema of insistent questioning instead of rapid foreclosure, clarifying distance in place of violating closeness, provocation and dialogue instead of consumption and consensus. What did you mean by that, and why did you take that approach?
Because the richness of the collection, the importance of the content was, to me, already difficult to choose what to put in a film. And I think that it is very important to have, on an artistic level, I wanted to grant the audience a cinematic experience, to give them the feeling that they are part of and not that they are looking at something from the side. And as a documentary filmmaker who hopes to pass a message in the film, I wanted to avoid narration and guiding voices and psychologists and Holocaust survivors and historians in order to allow the viewer to reflect on what he saw, to let him decide what he thinks, to let him judge for himself from Himmler's word what he thinks and what are the conclusions and what he's taking with him and what he will bear in mind for the future. So the sense of discomfort is something that I hoped to create, but not for the fact of feeling uncomfortable, but for the viewer to overcome the discomfort and then reflect.
I understand. Your grandparents are Holocaust survivors. How did they react to the material and to the film?
They were very, very supportive. My grandfather, who's an Auschwitz survivor, is not alive anymore.
I'm sorry.
So he doesn't know about it. I think that he probably would have had an issue with it, but I hope that within 7 years, I would have been able to explain him and convince him. He was a very emotional man. My grandmother, who passed away 2 years ago, was very, very, very supportive of the project. And the parents of my father, who are still alive, were supportive, and they saw the film in Berlin, and they liked it very much. There is a small side story we released in Israel 3 weeks ago, and a survivor came to me after the screening, and he told me that for the first time, he saw what they saw while he was where he was. He was in Auschwitz, he was in the camps, he lost all his family. I think to him, he said, it is very, very, very important for people to see what they saw and how they lived when they were doing what they were doing to us. So I'm very curious and very, I really want to, it's very important to me, the reaction and the feelings of the Holocaust survivors on the film. And for the moment, this is the reaction we got, so.
That's amazing. You also worked with Himmler's grandniece. What was that like?
It was, you know, I know it is, it seems very, it seems very complicated, but it's less complicated than it appears, because she's a grown-up, I'm a grown-up. She wrote a book 15 years ago about the Himmler brothers. So this is what she's doing. This is her way of taking responsibility for what her family did. And so we met at a point where she already decided for her life and knew what she will do. And I knew what I want to do with the collection. So the encounter was very, very clean. And we had the same aim. So we started to, she's the one who transcribed the content of the collection. She was a research partner for 7 years. In parallel of me doing the film, she wrote a book with Professor Wild on the collection, because in her eyes and in the eyes of the historian, it is important enough and there is enough of new academic historical information to write a book. It's a book that was published together with the film in February in Germany and France, and in the coming months will be published in 14 different countries and languages, including the US. So,
is it called The Decent One?
I don't know how it will be called in America. You know, every country is calling it differently. In German, it is called Himmler Privat, Briefes eines Massmörderers, Private Himmler Letters from a Mass Murderer. In French, it is called The Intimate Correspondence of Heinrich Himmler and His Wife, with the subtitle Inside the Intimacy of the Father of the Final Solution. And in the other countries, it will probably be, in all the countries, for publishers, it will be a private title with a subtitle mentioning who he was, either mass murderer or Reichsführer or father of the final solution.
Right. Most people are struck by the discrepancy between Himmler's role as a family man and his role as the architect of the final solution. But what I actually found the creepiest was his obsession with this like medieval notion of the ancient one. That like really kind of insane fantasy, and his everyday obsession with detail. That's what I found really creepy.
I agree with you. Me too. Me too. And you know, I agree with you 100%. And this is the big danger, because we all have myths. We all have, you know, images of something that may have been, but maybe not, because it's mixed with fantasy, and so we all have this. The danger in believing in a myth, whether it is a true myth or a false myth, is that the moment that you start living and aiming to achieve the myth, a myth is a myth and shall remain a myth. It's like a dream is a dream, and there are things that can happen in a dream that cannot be translated practically and happen in reality. And they are beautiful dreams. So the myths of you know, of fairy tales and of ancient history and of the good and the bad and of the David and Goliath, all those myths are myths, and it's good that they are there, and they have a deep philosophical and academical meaning. The problem with Himmler is that for him, there was no difference between the myth and the reality. Especially, and when you go deeper, you also realize that the myth was not a real myth, it was a myth. So I agree with you, and even if it was real, being obsessed and trying to achieve something that is not real cannot end in a good way.
Yeah. I have time for one more question. You said something earlier that it was translated from Old German into, Himmler wrote in Old German?
Not only Himmler, until 43, early 43, German was Südlingdeutsch, which is Old German, a different handwriting. And in 43, beginning of 43, Adolf Hitler woke up one morning and came to the conclusion that the Old German is a Jewish invention. So starting now, Old Germany shall write in modern German. So until 43, all the writings that exist until 43, including the diary of Gudrun, are written in Südlingdeutsch, which is Old German. The letters are more Gothic letters. And so in order to understand it, because it's like Latin. You don't have today a lot of people who can read and understand Latin. So Katrin is one of the people who knows, and together with a team of a few people who still know Old German, they transcribe it to modern German.
Was it just the orthography?
Yes.
Or,
I mean, I'm not a linguistic, but it is mainly the orthography of it, and a few pronunciations or a few additional letters that in modern German are not there anymore, but mainly the orthography, yes.
Now, did he decree that for the entire nation or just for the...
Yes, for the entire nation.
Wow. And one more question, is there anything that you'd like to add?
So it's the first time that we have access to the mind, up to a certain extent, of course, of a high-ranking Nazis. And although there is nothing seemingly new, and it's not the aim to say we have something new. The aim is to realize that all of us, we have here something that can be useful in order to avoid it to happen again. Right. And this is the importance, I believe, of the film.
Thank you so much.
I thank you.
Okay. I'm Judy Gelman Myers for Shalom TV, JBS, and I've been speaking with Vanessa Lapa, director of the fascinating documentary, The Decent One. Thanks.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV on JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, P.O. Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.